We're all set.
Well, it just happens to be Friday. What a miracle. Another week is winding down. Well, this week we're going to wind down while I tell you all about the birds and the bees. Now, isn't that just what you wanted to hear to start your weekend off? Actually, I'm not. What I'm going to do is share with you a magical book called The Moth. It is available in paperback form at Story and Song. And the preface is by Adam Gopnik and the foreword by George Dawes Green, edited with an introduction by Catherine Burns. I'm just going to read the foreword to you and then go into the stories. And this is something that is very popular on PBS and is a wonderful celebration of the art of telling a story. And you know, we all love stories. Forward. Once on a porch on a Georgia island, while a troop of moths staggered around the light, while cicadas kept time in the live oaks, Dayton Malone told us of the night he'd let 6,000 chickens escape from the shed he was supposed to be minding. I've forgotten the details. Too much bourbon. But his easygoing frankness has stayed with me. He was simply unsuited for the job of chicken minder. He'd left the door unlatched and gone to bed. In the morning, the girls were gone. He went out and searched the horizon and saw a far-off smear of white, the last of them receding. I loved Dayton when he told that story. This feeling surprised me because we never really gotten along. He was a true son of the South and was always needling me about my newfounded Yankiness, my scalawaggery. Plus, he was always trying to shake salt on my food. Oh, he was a pro-salt fanatic. But his saga of the lost chickens seemed so candid and clownish and human, and everything about it. You know, the hill country cadence, the trailing off sweep of his hands as he muttered, "Gone, every last one of them." His sad whistle of defeat struck me as, well, not honest exactly. He was too much of a showman for that, but utterly revealing of the man. Oh, we heard stories like that all night. If you were looking for literal truth, you wouldn't find it. But on Wanda's porch, you got such full doses of character and loss and destiny that you always come away reeling. Now, of course, the bourbon heightened this effect. Years later, I was living in New York, and one night I happened to be at some particularly dull and sing-songy poetry reading in the East Village, and I started missing Wanda's porch and wishing the poet would lower her aesthetic screen for the moment. Just tell us a story. That was it. That was the germ. An idea fluttered through my thoughts that I might organize a night of storytelling in New York City in honor of those nights at Wanda's. I supposed it would be fairly easy. New York must be filled with frustrated raconteurs. So, several years later, after much fussing and fainting and overthinking, that idea finally launched. I hosted an evening at my loft in Manhattan. I hired a director, the brilliant and indefatigable Joey Exanders. We rented chairs. We served hors d'oeuvres. We called it the Moth, and it was a bomb. Stories were all overcrafted, or too prettified, or too lugubriously confessional. Oh, and way too long. I didn't tell a story, but in saying a few words, I managed to be as long-winded as any of them. My guests were polite afterwards. Someone even called the evening noble. But I wanted to crawl into a hole. However, late that night, after many drinks, my friend Sherry Holman said, well, yeah, it was awful, unquestionably. But there was still something moving about it, just the idea of it. A night of stories? And the way she said it, a night of stories, it recalled Wanda's porch so vividly, so romantically, that suddenly I was hell-bent to try again. I got many friends to pitch in, and Joey scoured the city for raconteurs. We set down some guiding principles. All stories would be rehearsed, shaped. We would demand freshness, and the non-jokey kind of wit that bubbles up naturally from true human predicaments. We would insist on pithiness, pithiness above all. Oh, we brought a saxophonist in to be the timekeeper. We began to put on moths all over town and discover one by one true raconteurs. Jonathan Ames was our first star. His style was frenetic and disturbing. Standing before us, composing on his feet, he'd dip into his bank of memories and drag to the surface whatever hideous artifacts he happened upon. He would not censor them. Once, he told us of his first discovery of masturbation and how he'd gone running exultantly to his mother with the news of it. If he was ashamed of that episode, he shared it anyway. With such passion, he would plunge in. He'd get wilder and wilder. He'd seem out of control. I'd imagine him as some crippled, storm-tossed ship bound for the rocks. Though the rudderlessness was all an illusion, Jonathan was sitting calmly in the pilot house and knew exactly where he was going. When he was ready, he would bring his story to a sudden casual shrugging close and then stroll off stage while he caught our breaths. Frank McCourt, author of Angela's Actress, had a sweet voice and scapegrace cheekiness. Sense of great loss accompanied him always. He laughed at that loss and held it in contempt, yet it was so present to us that all hearts were broken at the moment he began to speak. Whereas George Plimpton seemed truly buoyed by his defeats. He tried his hand gamely at various sports and failed spectacularly at all of them except court tennis, and he was a master of that one lovely oddball game. His pratfalls had inspired half a dozen great memoirs, and they were the source also of his power as a raconteur. We loved best the moments in his stories when his impostors would be revealed, when all pretension would be unmasked. They were true raconteurs. Our Moth directors made them work, made them condense and tweak and reshape and condense some more. But those gentlemen never complained because they truly liked telling stories. They liked telling them over and over again. Of course, they all knew that the key to personal storytelling is owing up to one's foolishness. They had learned Orwell's famous lesson. Autobiography is only to be trusted when it reveals something disgraceful. A man who gives a good account of himself is probably lying, since any life, when viewed from the inside, is simply a series of defeats. But beyond that, each knew how to expose his humiliations in his own way. Each had his own squint or stutter or palms up gesture of hopelessness, and could make himself into a singular, full-body work of art upon our stage. It was something to behold. So much so that some of us boldly predicted that this new thing, new in the sense that these nights of raw personal stories, Porsche stories, were coming out at last from the kitchen to the stage, might well become the art of the 21st century. To nurture that dream has been an enormous labor, and many folks have given up huge chunks of their lives. Please see my thank yous at the back of this book. In the impossible early years, I had to beg fortunes from friends just to keep us alive. And of course, there have been insane fireball clashes of ego, which attend, I suppose, to the birth of any creative enterprise. So many prima donnas. The famous acrobat who scorned direction with a volley of insults that had to be scratched. The famous French philosopher who could recount his dull successes entirely, but could not, when pressed, recall a single thing that he'd ever failed at. The comedian who would not shut up, no matter how loudly the saxophone played. The self-obsessed movie star. Well, I know Catherine is terrified as she reads this, and I probably shouldn't tell you about the self-obsessed movie star. But there are also nights when I'll walk to one of our slams and pass block after block of people who've been waiting in lines for hours because our nights of shared stories are so compelling. Or I'll be at Cooper Union, hearing Mike DeStefano's tale of giving his dying wife, Fanny, one last Harley ride. And I'll look around at every man and woman within sight who will be openly weeping. Or I'll be sitting in on a high school slam rehearsal in a suburb of Atlanta, and a shy teenage girl will be relaying the smallest possible episode. Her encounter with a buck deer on her way home from school one day. And all of us will be grinning from ear to ear because her little vignette is such an immense pleasure. Or I'll be at the Immortal Players Club in Manhattan, and the room will be dotted with my beloved friends, and one of our greats, Adam Gopnik, or Juliet Hope Wayne, or Joan Juliet Buck, or Edgar Oliver, will be up on stage, approaching their tale's climax, and there will be not a sound in the room. Every spine in the house will be tuned to the soul standing before the microphone, everyone awaiting the word, locked onto the rhythm of the teller's breathing, and waiting for whatever perfect confession of futility and foolishness and humanity is about to come rolling down upon us. And at those times, that silly little notion that I had 16 years ago will seem quite smart. And now, a story or two. And if we run out of time, I'll approach these stories next time as well, because they are, each and every one of them, wonderful. And I can't read a whole book full, but I wish I could. Let me see. Oh, one of the co-founders, Adam Gopnik, LOL. Now we've all typed that on our phone, on our computer, on whatever devil tool we choose to use. And LOL is the title of this Moth story. Now, the story I want to tell you tonight is a simple story about myself and my son, Luke. Some of you may have read about him over the years. Oh, I write about him often enough. And the truth is, we've always been pretty good friends, father and son, of course, but we've always shared a lot in common. We lived through Paris together, and we love football. I've taught him to love hockey. We even love the same hockey team, the Montreal Canadiens. But recently, he turned 12. And in New York City, because everything is a little accelerated, 12 is really 13. And when 13 happens to kids, as you all know, something profound changes. They begin to become adolescents. They approach being teenagers, and the bond, no matter how strong it is between father and son, or mother and son, or daughter, begins to change, begins to alter, and suddenly they become more distant from you. And it's like, if I can even use the word in this context, it's sort of like the mortality of parenting. That is to say, you know it's going to happen, but you can't believe it's going to happen to you. You think, oh, it happened to other people, but it won't happen to me. And so, about a year ago, Luke started coming home from school at 3 o'clock. Oh, I work at home and I write. 3:15, I would open the door and I would do the thing that no parent should ever do, but that no parent can resist, even though you hear a chorus of parents passed behind you saying, oh, don't do that. The doorbell rings, you open it, and there's your 12-year-old. And you can't help yourself. You say, "How was your day at school?" And the 12-year-old hunches his shoulders, droops his head, and walks into his room without saying a word, and the door shuts. Now you know what's going on the other side of that door. He is on his computer. You sort of wish you could smell the healthy whiff of marijuana or hear the sounds of adolescent groping, because that at least you can connect to from your own adolescence. But there's not a chance of that. They're on their computers. They're instant messaging each other, 6 or 7 at a time, talking about just what big schmucks their parents are. And that's appropriate. And you never learn. The doorbell rings the next day at 3:15. You open it, and the great chorus of parents past you chants, "Do not ask the question." And like Oedipus, you do the thing you're never supposed to do. You say, "How was your day at school?" And you get a shrug. And he walks into his room and shuts the door. Well, I understood it. And I knew that he was back there in the silence, instant messaging his friends, as I say. Now, instant messaging is something that I could not understand. I couldn't understand the appeal of it, and I couldn't understand the prevalence of it. Because the truth is, when I was 12 years old, we used the telephone all the time. We had a series of phone conversations with everyone we knew. And it always seemed to me that had the telephone come second and the instant message been that thing that Alexander Graham Bell invented 100 years ago, well, there'd be no question that the telephone call would be the huge technological breakthrough. Now, if Steve Jobs had invented the phone call, it would have been on the front page of the Times the next day. And there'd have been giant back page ads everywhere you looked, talking about finally real voices, real communication. Liberate yourself from the pressure of the keyboard. Hear your sweetheart talk. Oh, it would have been the great breakthrough of the 20th century. But because that was the 19th century, kids, only instant message. Well, that is the only way I can understand it. Well, Luke is always insisting that I download software, Skype or LimeWare. And he insisted that I download AOL Instant Messenger. And I did. And I had it on my desktop. One day he comes in. I ask the question. He walks into his room. The door shuts. I go back to my little study and I'm writing. And suddenly I heard a ping on my screen. I look down and it's an instant message from Luke. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" And I write, "Nothing much. What's up with you?" And he says, "Oh, I had a terrible day at school. And right away, now he's 15 feet away from me, we have the conversation that he denied me at the front door 5 minutes before. And I realized, of course, what it was really all about. The appeal of instant messaging is that you control, the child controls the means of communication. You're not accepting the 315 third degree. You're claiming the right to control your own conversation. And so every day from then on, it became a sort of ritual. It was practically Japanese. Doorbell would ring. I would open the door. Luke would come in. We would bow to each other. He would say nothing. He would walk into his room, shut the door. I would go back into my office and shut the door. And about 30 seconds later, a ping would go on. And it would be Luke. Hey, Dad, what's up with you today? And we would instant message each other and have a conversation about our days. And sometimes we'd actually be sitting on the same bed, watching a hockey game together, instant messaging each other in total silence. Now, I loved instant messaging once I'd gotten the hang of it. I loved the simplicity of it. I loved the autonomy of it. And I loved the language of abbreviations that instant messaging has. Oh, Luke taught me all of the abbreviations. BRB means be right back. U2 means you too. G2G means got to go. Oh, and then there was one that he didn't even have to teach me because, it was so self-evident. And that was LOL. Oh, and I knew right away that it meant lots of love because he put it at the end of every message he sent to me. And even when I saw him, sent him a really sententious message, one of those, just do the things you've got to do, and then you'll be able to do the things you want to do. I had homework too. He would always write back, okay, Dad, LOL, Luke. And I was really moved by this because even when I was lecturing him, he was able to absorb in a mature way and send lots of love back to me as he thought about it. And I thought, this is such a beautiful telegraphic abbreviation for the 20th century because it's like a little arrow of love you can send out to anyone you know. And for the next 6 months, I was infatuated with instant messaging and its power of emotional transmission. And I sent LOL to everybody I knew. My sister was getting divorced out in California, and I wrote to her, we're behind you and beside you, LOL. Your brother, my father, got ill. I sent him LOL in Canada. Everybody I knew at work, at home, everyone, I sent them LOL. I was an instant messaging demon. Well, one evening, I'm in the lounge at LaGuardia, waiting for a plane. I have to travel a lot to speak, and I was IMing with Luke and instant messaging, and he and I were discussing this, and I was really full of emotion. I hate traveling, and I don't like being away from the children. And I wrote him, Luke, I just want you to understand that every weekend I'm away is a weekend I hate, but I have to do it to live the life we want to live and to make money for us. LOL, your dad. And suddenly, on my screen, there at midnight, in the lounge of LaGuardia, I see coming across my screen giant letters like an incoming message from NORAD. Bombers are on the way. And it says, Dad, what exactly do you think LOL means? Luke. And I write back, well, lots of love, obviously. And he writes back, no, Dad, it means laughing out loud. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does, Dad. Of course, it does. That's all it means. I was miserable. Not only had I been totally misunderstanding the degree of ridicule that Luke had been shooting at me for 6 months, but I was going to have to repeal 6 months worth of LOL. I was going to have to go through every single person I'd sent an instant message to and apologize for having made fun of them in the midst of their suffering. And I thought to myself, this is the real nature of every communication between children, parent, and child. We send them lots of love. They laugh out loud at us, and we don't even know we're doing it. We stopped instant messaging each other. Then a couple months later, Luke and I went off for a trip together, and my computer broke, and I had to send something in to work. So Luke said, so I said to Luke, Luke, can I use your computer? And he said, okay. Well, just give me your password so I can get on. He said, I don't want to give you my password. And I said, Luke, why don't you want to? He said, well, you give me your password. Well, my password is you, Luke 94, your name and the year you were born. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. So tell me, what's your password? And he said, it's Montreal Puck. Wasn't exactly Dad, but it was pretty close. It was something that we had shared and secretly he had encoded as his way out into the world. It was as though we were packing his suitcase, but he was packing it with something I had given him. And from that night on, when we got back to New York, we started IM, instant messaging, each other again. And every time we would include it. LOL, because here's the thing that I think is true. It's what I've learned. And that is that through all those months when Luke was laughing out loud at me, and I didn't even know it, he never thought there was something strange about our miscommunication. He never stopped to think that there was something wrong about the way that I was using LOL. Because if you think about it, there are very few times in life when saying, "I'm laughing out loud in your presence," and saying, "I love you a lot," are really close enough to count. They're not exactly the same. If they were, we would never grieve when someone we loved died. But in most of the exchanges that we have between ourselves, our children, saying, "I'm laughing," and saying, "I love you," are a reasonable hit. Oh, a near miss. Good enough to carry on with. And so every night, the last thing we do, me from my bedroom and Luke from his, is to send each other an instant message. And we always end it. LOL. LOL, Dad. LOL, Luke. It doesn't matter what it means. It means laughter or love or whatever it might mean at that moment to us. Now, time has a way of creeping on. I hadn't realized this story would take so long, but I was just savoring the telling of it. So I think what I'm going to plan on doing is sharing a different story with you next Friday. And now, have a joyous weekend. Find something magical, special, and go for it. And I leave you with one thought. LOL.